In Exodus chapter 12, we'll stay here and go down to verse 19. This is going to emphasize what we read in verse 15. For 7 days no leaven is to be found in your houses. For if anyone eats what is leavened, that same being shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether a sojourner or a native of the land. So now we're talking about the sojourner, and here it's again the ger. The sojourner meaning the one who's like a proselyte, the one who is studying to decide whether or not he wants to become like a native, in other words, become grafted together with Israel. We've read about that in other teachings and understanding the Exodus process and the scriptures that talk about that there is one law or one right ruling for both the sojourner and the native. So the expectation is that while you are deciding to affiliate, to assemble, to join, to be grafted in, the expectation is that you behave just like a native. And this, by the way, is part of what you see in Acts 15 when you see Yaakov say, okay, they need to abstain from strangled and from blood and from whoring and from, right, the fourth listings there. And so and idolatry, there's your 4. Now, what was he saying there? He's saying, you know what? He's saying, tell them they can't go to a pagan temple. Now, he didn't tell them that specifically. But if you went to the pagan temple, actually in the right order, he says they can't do idolatry. Okay, you can't do idolatry. You can't do whoring. Well, when you went to the pagan temple, there would be a temple prostitute. They would then strangle an animal and take its blood and feed it to you. So these are the 4 things that would happen in almost every pagan temple. And so he basically made it impossible for them to go to the pagan temple while also going to the synagogue on the Sabbath where Moses is preached, where they're going to hear Moses preached. This goes back to the same thing about the same laws for the ger as for the native. And we've been teaching this a lot in our Covenant Community 101 course about how there is but one in the Father's eyes. And when you are that one, whatever that one is, he calls it Israel. So there are those that are Israel, and there are those that graft into Israel. And then there are those that were native, that were born in Israel, who actually leave. Because you could be born here in this country, and you can leave. You can change your citizenship to somewhere else. Matthew chapter 16 and in verse 1. Okay, Matthew 16 and in verse 1. And the Pharisees and Sadducees came and trying him asked that he would show them a sign from heaven. And he answering said to them, when it is evening, you say fair weather, for the heaven is red. In the morning, stormy weather today, for the heaven is red and overcast. You know how to discern the face of the heaven, but you are unable to discern the signs of the times. A wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign shall be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. And he left them and went away. Okay, so let's stop there, and I want to use it. When I read this, as I was putting this together, it struck me that I've never taught this before, but it needs to be said. And nobody get mad at me, I hope. All of you, and you know who you are, who are looking for blood moons and looking for whatever signs and studying all that, you are a wicked and adulterous generation. He just said that. All you seeking signs and trying to figure it all out, he calls you a wicked and adulterous generation. Knock it off. Was that too subtle? Let's stop that. He says that we need to be paying attention to the signs of the times. Why? So that we make sure we're found so doing. Not that we're found so figuring it out. Hey, Master, you found me so figuring it out. No, I wanted to find you so doing. I didn't want to find you so studying. But you're studying to take the actions to show you doing. Isn't that interesting what he said? He said, look, a wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign. What was the sign they were looking for? The sign of his coming. What is the sign you're all looking around for? The sign of his coming. I think the verse may apply to you. Sounds like an in focus coming. Marty's like, yep. Get me in more trouble. Let's remember verse 4. He says, look, a wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign shall be given except the sign of the prophet Jonah. Well, we already have that sign. He gave that sign. He was killed, died, was resurrected 3 days later, 3 days, 3 nights, sign of Jonah. There it is. He gave us that one sign. The rest of it, he says, look, but you are unable to discern the signs of the times. Just look at what's going on and let that motivate you in your so doing. He goes to verse 5. He says, and his taught ones came to the other side and forgotten to take bread. And Yeshua said to them, mind and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, because we brought no bread? Well, first of all, let's understand problem number one is reasoning amongst yourselves. Yeshua's there. Why are they reasoning amongst themselves? Why not just ask a straight question? See, but we're afraid to go to leadership. We're afraid to admit that we don't know something. So what do? We find other people that don't know something, the same something you don't know, and we start reasoning amongst ourselves. I just love the phone calls that I get on a regular basis from people that are all upset about something they learned from somebody they don't even hardly know that was on the internet that said something. So you're reasoning amongst yourselves. Why don't you have a relationship with your teacher, whoever that teacher is, and call them? Now, they did call me after they already were busy reasoning amongst themselves and got themselves into a pit. And we're now all confused, and now they didn't know what to do. And they're all upset, and they're all distraught, and they're all confused. Because here they are, they didn't know. Well, instead of reasoning amongst themselves. They said, because we have no bread? Now, Yeshua, aware of this, listen to this, they still didn't come to him. He was aware of what was going on, and he went over to them. They should have gone to him and said, you just said something about the leaven of the Pharisees. What is that about? Oh, no. No, they're reasoning amongst themselves. So some of you might say, oh, but we have the Ruach. We don't need other leaders and teachers. Yeshua was right there. They didn't go to him. Are you any different, really? Are we all any different? Oh, but I asked the Ruach. I don't know, does the Ruach actually speak to you? I mean, do you hear his voice? I mean, I don't know, what is happening in your life? You go to the teacher. Their teacher was right there, and they didn't go to him. Yeshua, aware of this, said to them, O you of little belief, why do you reason among yourselves because you brought no bread? Do you still not understand, neither remember the 5 loaves and the 5,000 and how many baskets you picked up? Or the 7 loaves and the 4,000 and how many large baskets you picked up? How is it that you do not understand that I did not speak to you concerning bread, physical bread? He said, but to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Then, now notice he hadn't really said anything different, but he said enough for them to start thinking and connecting dots. He says, then they understood that he did not say to beware of the leaven of bread, but of the teaching of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So now leaven has something to do with teachings. And oh, you guys love to go out there and seek after teachings all over the place. Especially you pick a topic that you're interested in, and then you'll go and find 15 different teachers teaching on that subject and walk away more confused than when you started. You'll do that, won't you? I don't care what the topic is. I don't have to name topics. You've done it. You know. Especially if you don't like the first teacher's answer, then you're going to go find one that maybe you like better.